Hello, I'm Cathy.
I'm Rachel.
I'm Laura, and welcome to Linabad Book Club!
Woo! So today we are reviewing The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien.
A classic.
A classic. So I read this years and years ago for the first time. I read it as a child. Well, actually, my dad started reading me this when I was quite young. I don't know how young. Younger than 13. He'd read me The Hobbit.
Wow.
And then he started reading The Fellowship of the Ring to me. I'm sure I remember him starting it. And then partway through that, I kind of grew out of being read to at bedtimes, and I had to finish the trilogy off on my own.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it took a few attempts to do it, but I finished reading the whole series just like a couple of years before the films came out, and I was so excited when the films came out.
I can imagine.
That was a good time for me in 2000, 2001. Very, very good time. It was out every Christmas. It was amazing. So I've loved this book for a long time, and I've just reread it again over Christmas. And then, did you read this? Was it last year or was it the year before?
Yeah, so, much like yourself, I tried to read the trilogy. And not as a child, as an old teenager / young adult. And so I think I've read Fellowship 3 or 4 times. Because I have to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
If I fail and then come back to it later on. So I think I've read Fellowship about 3 times, and then I'd get to Two Towers and stop halfway through.
Yeah.
But then last year, one of my friends put together a schedule for reading Lord of the Rings chronologically. As in, so pretty much Fellowship, you're just reading Fellowship of the Ring. But then when you get to Two Towers and Return of the King, you're reading different people's
the characters split up.
Yeah. So you're reading different chapters at different times and things like that. So you're pretty much reading Fellowship just straight through. So I started that So I started that in 2022, and then it carried over into 2023. So I finished Fellowship in 2023.
Yeah.
In the early year, because that's when Fellowship finishes in the calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think out of the trilogy, Fellowship of the Ring is perhaps the easiest to read, because it's one narrative. You're not jumping between the characters. So what happens, in case you didn't know,
Have you been living under a rock?
in case you didn't know, the plot of the Fellowship of the Ring is that there's a hobbit called Frodo who inherits a magic ring from his uncle Bilbo, and then discovers that this ring is like the most powerful weapon of a dark enemy overlord.
Oh no.
And the ring is the one thing this enemy needs to take over the entire world. So the hobbit has to go on a quest, first of all to run away from the bad guys who are after him to get the ring back, and then on a more purposeful quest to destroy the ring forever. And he teams up with some other great characters and beings of different mythical races, and their plan is to walk from one edge of the world pretty much to another to get to a giant volcano and throw the ring in there to destroy it, but that volcano happens to be in the land which the enemy controls, and that's the basic plot. Yeah. So the Fellowship of the Ring is kind of seen like the granddaddy of fantasy fiction, because it's credited as being like the first book in popular fiction where there's a magical realm of like monsters and hero's journey that isn't A, connected to an already established religion, or B, isn't set in the world as we know it. So like Middle-earth is kind of vaguely Europe, but it's like a Europe that never could have existed. It's like an alternative universe of Earth, but not quite. So yeah, it's a real like landmark book in the fantasy genre. I think for me, because like this was like one of the first fantasy books I read, I think I thought all fantasy books were this difficult.
Okay. Yeah.
And now I realise they're not quite. But I think all fantasy books take a while to get used to.
Yeah. It can be hard to get into fantasy books because you are met with this whole foreign world that you don't know any of the customs or the geography or the language structure, the infrastructure, the hierarchy. You've got to learn it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's all given to you in a massive heap at the beginning, and it's overfacing, and you tap out. And sometimes it's trickled through to you throughout the novel, and you're spending a lot of time like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm liking it.
Yeah, and it's really hard, that thing of like, how are you going to delve into your exposition? Because I would say The Hobbit does it so beautifully, like, you know, in a ground in the hole there lived a hobbit, and then like 3 pages of just how lovely hobbits are, and it's told so beautifully and fairy tale like that you're drawn in. And I feel like Fellowship of the Ring almost tries to do that, but like reading it this time, I was a bit like, oh, am I going to read the prologue or not? Because the prologue, I'm going to count how many pages the prologue is.
Yeah, it's just like a history book, isn't it?
Yeah. So the prologue is 21 pages long, and it's mostly about, well, yeah, it's almost like a book of like little essays about the world of Middle Earth. So like there's a bit about...
Once you've read it once, you already know it.
Yes.
You don't need to read it again.
So there's a bit about concerning hobbits, which again tells you about like how hobbits live, and I think that's fairly cute, but then that includes like the whole geography of the Shire and where the towns are and how the towns get on to one another.
Is there a bit of like genealogy as well?
I think so. There's also concerning pipeweed. So there's a whole chapter in here about how the hobbits smoke pipeweed and how they might have been the first creatures of Middle Earth to ever do so. Yeah, there's like family hierarchies, and you don't really need to read that to enjoy the story. So I think I skim read it this time.
Okay.
And then I jumped into book 1. So yeah, I think with stuff like Fellowship of the Ring, there is like a little bit of settling in. But once you're settled in,
it's so nice.
Yeah.
It's just nice. You just...
It is
What a very profound thought there. It's nice.
It is so nice, because you start pretty much at a birthday party, and it sounds like the most wonderful birthday party you could ever go to, and it's so idyllic. But then there's like the shadow of something going on with Bilbo, and he's getting ready to disappear.
And then he does disappear, and then they're just vibing for like 4 chapters, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then Gandalf comes and says, Doom! Frodo, it's doom all around, and in fact, the Black Riders are here and they're after you.
Ah!
And Frodo goes, okay, should I run? Yeah, you should probably run. And Frodo goes, in about 9 months? Yeah, fine. Yeah, fine, 9 months. And then they set off on the day the Black Riders arrive in the Shire, which is quite cool. So there's so much we could talk about this, but I think I'm going to look at my notes of like the things I do want to talk about. I guess first of all, do you have a favourite character?
I love Merry. I just love him.
Yeah.
I can't explain why. Just love him. He's just very level-headed.
Yeah.
And I think there's no question. When Frodo is leaving, he thinks that he's going to go alone, and obviously all the hobbits are like, well, yeah, obviously we're going to come with you. But I think Merry is very dependable, and he just loves his friends.
Yeah.
He does a lot of organising. He doesn't get to go on the walk through the countryside because he's taking all the furniture.
I know, he's like the mum of the group.
Yeah, he is the mum of the group. Aw, Mummy Merry.
Goes on ahead to sort everybody out. Yeah.
We get there, he's already made their baths and all the food and stuff.
Yeah.
He's just a great, sweet, dependable friend. He is the epitome of supporting character. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And do you know what? I noticed this time reading through, because I think in the past I've got a little bit frustrated with how long it takes the hobbits to like leave the Shire and get to Bree. I feel like once you get to Bree,
it all kicks off.
We got Aragorn and then the Council of Elrond, and I love all that stuff. But the bits where it's just the hobbits getting into adventure after adventure and not seeming to get very far really frustrated me. But that noise was Ola doing the flip in the background.
Oh, she's turned on the PlayStation.
With her foot. But this time, reading through the Fellowship of the Ring and just really deciding to like go with it and enjoy the early Hobbit chapters, I noticed how much interesting stuff's going on with the dynamic between the hobbits. Like I noticed how much like Frodo has always had this dual thing of like he kind of wants to be like Bilbo and go on adventures, but he also really loves his home comforts, and he is a bit pampered and a bit wealthy. So like in quite a few of the early chapters, they're going and Frodo's like, "Oh, my bag's really heavy. I bet you've put all the heaviest stuff in mine." And Sam's like, "I've got a bit more room. I could carry more." And it's Merry who says, "Don't you dare, Sam. You've taken more than your fair share, and Frodo needs to get a grip." Pretty much. And then earlier on, like so later, I think when they're at the house and like they want to set off early next morning, Merry wakes them up and I was like, "Come on, guys, come and have breakfast." And Phil's like, "Oh, I'm so tired."
It's so early. Oh, Mary's been up for like an hour preparing food. Come on, man.
Exactly. And then Phil just be like, "Come on, guys, we gotta get a move on." And I'm like, "We have got to move on. It's you, mate." So there's quite a bit of like gentle poking fun at Frodo. Actually, like he's a little bit pampered and a bit oblivious. But his friends call him out on it, which I think keeps him grounded. And this time reading through, I picked up how Sam's art progresses. And I think you can kind of tell that when Tolkien started writing Fellowship of the Ring, it was a sequel to The Hobbit. Hobbits go out on an adventure and it's kind of fun and light-hearted, and Sam is very much comic relief. Like, when he gets told by Gandalf, you get to go with Frodo and see the elves, he like laughs, claps his hands, and then cries.
Relatable.
yeah. So he's almost like cartoonish in like the first steps. But even before like the end of the novel, you see Sam is like always thinking ahead, and he observes stuff, and he's like he pretends to be asleep when he's not, so he kind of eavesdrops on the elves. And he like notices like the elves are very beautiful and interesting, he says, but they're also very sad. So Sam is very quietly perceptive. And there's a lot more going on with him than I think people realise at first. And then at the end of the novel, so the Fellowship of the Ring, it is rings. Ring.
No, Ring. Lord of the Rings. Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah. The Fellowship of the Ring ends a bit differently to the movie in that it ends before Merry and Pippin get kidnapped and before Boromir dies. So it ends with Frodo deciding, "I'm going to go off alone now." And so I was like, "Yeah, I'm coming too." I just think Sam is so clever and perceptive to figure out what is Frodo going to be doing, what's going to be thinking, where's he going to be, and puts himself there. So yeah, love Sam, and appreciated him so much more again reading it through this time.
Yeah. He's very knowledgeable about the way that Frodo's mind works.
Yeah.
Their relationship is very close.
Yeah. One thing I noticed as well this time reading through, I now have a new theory about Boromir and Faramir.
Okay.
And this is probably an established thing for like Lord of the Rings
on the forums.
fans on the forums. But I'm not on the forums, and I am slow, and I discovered it for myself, so it counts.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Hit me with it.
So, when I was reading the Council of Elrond chapters, I had never clocked before that when Boromir tells his story, he kind of says, "My brother Faramir has had this dream over and over and over again, and I've had it a couple of times," and the dream kind of says, "You need to go to Rivendell, and there's something about a halfling." And he says Faramir really wanted to follow the dream and come here and find out what the meaning is, but because it was a dangerous thing and an adventure, I said I should go. And it just kind of hit me. I think Faramir was destined to be part of the Fellowship, not Boromir. And Boromir busted in on the Fellowship and the Council, and it was Faramir who'd been chosen by fate, or whatever power gave the dreams.
Okay. I think Merry is my favourite character, but also I would die for Boromir. I'd die for him. He you know that I love tragedy.
Yeah.
And he is the tragedy in Lord of the Rings.
He really is. He really is.
Getting emotional.
Oh! And I think that works because Faramir has the right temperament to be part of the Fellowship. Because he does get the same temptation that Boromir does, and he resists.
Boromir resists!
Boromir resists too. Boromir does an amazing job. He does. But I know, and this isn't hate on Boromir. But I think that's an interesting thing of like, perhaps Faramir was destined for this quest. And would have been really suited for it, but because he was the younger brother, because he's not as forceful as Boromir and not as much as a warrior, it's decided, no, we need to send our warrior. We need to send our older son. He needs to carry it. We send him. And Boromir is noble and powerful, but he's not right for this task.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he does fall to the temptation. And don't you love him for the fall, though?
I adore Boromir. I know that I just said that Merry is my favourite character, but I adore Boromir. I love a tragedy. You know I do.
Yeah.
How do you, if a hypothetical scenario, Faramir comes on the quest, how does that change things?
Well, yeah. So, maybe.
Because Boromir is the catalyst for Frodo and Sam leaving.
Yeah.
Boromir saves Merry and Pippin.
And Merry and Pippin splitting up become the catalyst for the Rohans and Gondor, really.
Exactly.
Yeah, so maybe it all worked out in the end. Yeah, I don't know, because if Faramir had been here... Well, because Frodo was still undecided.
Mm-hmm.
Even before Boromir makes his play and tries to get the ring, Frodo was still kind of thinking, I need to go on alone. He was thinking that anyway. So maybe that still would have happened. I don't know.
The dynamic would be so different, because Faramir and Gandalf have history, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't that be so cool?
Oh, imagine Faramir in the Mines of Moria with Gandalf. And speaking of like Boromir as well, like I also noticed of how much, he's forceful and he's bolshy, but he's also the one who's like, the hobbits are going to die on this mountain of snow unless we need to do something now to change. And he puts himself in danger time and time again to protect the other members of the Fellowship. Like I love him too. Nearly anyone who ends up being played by Sean Bean is worth being in love with. But yeah, I wonder this time, I wonder if Faramir was meant to be part of the council.
I like that.
Yeah. And how that changes things. And I realised as well of how much, because I've read this so many times and I've watched the films and this story is like ingrained in me, that it's weird to try and imagine reading it without knowing everything. So I love the Council of Elrond now and how it pieces together.
Yeah.
But I also kind of get, if you're reading it for the first time, you're like, who's this dude Boromir? Why are we learning about Faramir? What is going on? Yeah. Can we move it along? Yeah. They talk about because they talk about Rohan and Gondor and what they're doing. Then you're like, what?
Why is this relevant?
Yeah.
But it is relevant.
It is relevant
because it's the whole world against Mordor.
Yeah.
Well, and Isengard, I suppose, but.
Yeah. But it's like it pays off, but it is very much like this. It's a story that starts really, really small with like a hobbit's birthday party and just gets
bigger and bigger
and bigger and bigger. And a lot of the seeds of what happens in the later books are first appearing in that Council of Elrond.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Speaking of things that kind of only appear in the book, what did you make of Tom Bombadil?
I don't really have an opinion on Tom Bombadil and Goldberry.
Yeah.
They're just there. I just accept that they're there and read it and
move on with your life.
Yeah.
I think that's how I feel too. I feel like, again, the Tom Bombadil chapter feels very much of like a book that was the Hobbit sequel, where just every chapter the Hobbits were going to have a fun adventure, and that's what Tom Bombadil.
But I don't hate
like.
it. But
no.
It's just there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's how I feel too. I feel like, and also I feel like, I never quite know how, I don't feel strongly about him. I like that he's also discussed in the council where they're like, can Tom Bombadil not save us all?
Yeah.
And they're like, no.
He doesn't want to.
He doesn't want to. He said he's got a really strong power in this one little area.
Yeah.
And that's where he's staying. But I quite like the fact that he is a bit of like a really a question mark in the book. He's very, very powerful. He's kind of outside of things. He's very sweet. He's loving. He's a bit otherworldly in this other world. And I think that's quite fun.
Yeah. And then, sort of on a similar line, the Barrow Downs are so creepy.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so creepy.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say about them. They're creepy.
They are creepy. In fact, that whole sequence is quite creepy because as well as them, I also realised this time of how creepy the Black Riders are. Because in the film versions, which you obviously watch a lot and they kind of influence how I experience this story now, I'm kind of used to like the thundering music coming in and they're giving chase and it's all like very dramatic. But in the book, a lot
more sinister, aren't they?
Yeah, in the book it's so much more sinister because it's just like they feel like they're getting along and then they turn around and there's a silhouette of the horses and the riders on the horizon and they're not sure like can they see us?
Mm-hmm.
Have they seen us? Are they coming this way? We don't know. And that terror of there's something after us that's not quite here yet, but not far away. And yeah, very creepy. Very well done.
Anything else?
Anything else? Gollum?
God.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think the last thing I wanted to mention about this read through of Lord of the Rings was how Gollum is kind of set up. So there's no real payoff yet, but in the early chapters when Gandalf is recapturing his story, and again Gollum becomes like a stalker, following him through the mines of Moria, and how early on it's set up that Gollum is like an alternative. I think mainly an alternative Bilbo.
Yeah.
Because Bilbo's had the ring for a long time, Gollum had the ring for a very long time. And Bilbo has started to show signs of being enthralled by the ring.
Great word.
Yeah. So yeah, Frodo has that terror of of Gollum already being the thing he could become. And Frodo's the one who's attuned to Gollum already. Frodo's the one who picks up, we're being followed.
Yeah.
And I think I know who's following us. I think that's really good. I enjoyed the Gollum setup and the themes of Gollum already coming out quite early on in the story. So yeah, I'm so glad I read this over Christmas. It was I felt like quite a comforting Christmas read for me.
That's cute.
I think that's the thing about fantasy novels is like it's hard work to get into them, but once you're in,
the payoff is great.
The payoff is great, and there's such a great way of stepping completely into a story. And I find it very comforting and encouraging and inspiring, because I think in this world that they do talk about goodness versus evil, and values and nobility, and I quite enjoy reading about that. It's quite I find it inspiring, and I'm looking forward. I want to read a lot more Tolkien this year, so I will reread the rest of the Lord of the Rings. I've read a biography of his, and I've got some of his short stories to read soon as well.
Cute. Those are all of our thoughts at the moment about Fellowship of the Ring. If you have anything to say about themes, characters, Tom Bombadil, leave them down in the comments. We love reading those. We release videos every Friday, so come back next week and we'll see you then. Bye. Bye. No, it's not the wolf footy anymore. Sorry. No more howling.
No more howling.
Oh! I'm done now. I'm done. I'm finished. I'm done.